Welcome to the Psychology of Film with Evil Sheep Productions. My name is Stephen. In this series we look at movies that have strong psychological themes and explore them from different angles. Today we're going to look at, including some spoilers, It's a Wonderful Life, directed by Frank Capra. It stars James Stewart as George and Donna Reed as Mary. The story revolves around George Bailey, a well-liked and respected member of the community of a small town called Bedford Falls, set in the 1920s and 30s. We watch George grow up and become a husband to Mary and a father of 4 children. Following the coming together of a number of disastrous events, George becomes suicidal and wishes he'd never been born. An unlikely-looking angel called Clarence is dispatched to Earth to help him, who shows George what we would probably now call a parallel universe, where George never existed. Through this experience he realises the good that he's done and how he's made the world a better place just by being in it. Following this, he's allowed to go back to reality, where the community has rallied around to rescue him from his unfortunate situation, and the film ends happily, with George appreciating that he does indeed have a wonderful life. The film is a Christmas feel-good favourite and most of us just enjoy the story, but it's been the subject of much discussion by psychologists and more than one research paper. I'm going to share with you 2 psychological perspectives of this film, one light and one a bit darker. So let's start with the darker reading. From a psychoanalytical perspective, it's easy to see George Bailey as a pretty neurotic character. Professor Andrew Gordon from the University of Florida describes him as split down the middle, an internal conflict between personal and financial success on the one hand and a desire to selflessly help his community on the other. The scene where George and Mary are dancing over the floor that's about to split apart suggests just this. In fact, the film isn't subtle about this split, and we see this conflict play out all through George's life, where he's given choices to pursue opportunities that his adventurous self desires, but he's then dragged back by his dutiful self. These 2 sides of his identity seem to fight for supremacy. George has 2 possible romances before him. One is Mary, the kind and stable homemaker, favourite of his mother, and the other Violet, a sexually provocative go-getter. There is a moment in the film just after his mother has been trying to influence George to go and see Mary, when he has a chance meeting with Violet. For a moment a no-commitment hookup seems likely, but George cannot help his romantic side trying to drag Violet into this adventurous fantasy of barefoot walks and skinny dipping. George's contradictions are laid bare, and Violet cannot understand the appeal. We quickly move to what I think is a slightly odd scene, when he visits Mary and tries to behave as though he doesn't really want to be there. Whilst he's with Mary, they share a telephone call from an old friend and now entrepreneur, Sam, who offers a business opportunity to George that seems to tick some of his boxes of making things. It brings his inner conflict to a head, and he roughly grabs hold of Mary, shouting at her that he doesn't want to be tied down by work or a wife. But we can see that he's tormented because of his attraction to her. They kiss, but it's not a warm, passionate kiss, it's a strangely aggressive and troubled one. Mary's mother is sneakily looking on and seems concerned. It's not clear whether she's concerned because of the scandalous kiss or that she sees something worrying there. There are other moments in the film where George, through a combination of bad luck and a choice to help others, means he's passed over for opportunity where others prosper. He's just about to go off to school when his father dies, and in order to ensure the greedy Mr. Potter doesn't get his hands on the business, with dire consequences for the community, George puts this off, never achieving this long-held desire. George is deaf in one ear from an infection acquired while saving his brother from drowning, so he never gets to serve in the army. His brother, on the other hand, becomes a war hero. Of course, he's passed over Sam's offer who goes on then to be a very successful businessman. Each of these moments adds another layer of frustration and possible feelings of resentment onto George. So when, through the incompetence of his uncle and the dirty dealings of Mr. Potter, he finds himself in a frightening position where he could lose everything, he erupts, physically manhandling his uncle, and then after trying to pull himself together for the family, losing his temper with them. He then ends up shouting at his daughter's schoolteacher on the phone. At this point, George appears to be losing control, his neurosis about to be exposed. There are some suggestions by some writers that the neurosis George displays is indicative of a type of conflict prevalent in American society as a whole. This tension between small-town America with its values of family and community, with an increasing striving for material wealth, big business and large faceless corporations. Others claim that George Bailey's struggle reflects the film director himself and his own confusion and self-doubt. So, was it such a wonderful life for George? Well, in typical Hollywood fashion, it all turns around for him, and through his glimpse into a world without George, he comes to appreciate his life, and additionally the community came through for him. So, this brings me to the second psychological perspective I want to share with you. It's actually called the George Bailey effect, tested experimentally and named after the character in the movie. This experiment investigates the impact of thinking about what might have been can have on our mood. You've probably heard the old saying to count your blessings, and much so-called positive psychology encourages us to dwell on the positive things in our life. Maybe having a habit of writing down everything that's good in our lives on a regular basis. So this experiment wanted to look at this, but also compare this practice of counting our blessings with imagining what life would have been like without them, and finding out what effect that has on mood. The experiment asked participants to write down a description of an event they were grateful for. In one of the conditions, they were also asked to describe why it was surprising that they had this good thing in their life, and to consider what life would have been like in the absence of that thing. Results showed a significant increase in happiness levels for those in the counterfactual or absence condition. So this suggests that instead of counting our blessings to raise our mood, a better exercise is to imagine a life without them, just as Clarence forced George to do. Reigniting of feelings of surprise for our good fortune may be part of the answer. I think we all know that we get used to good things very quickly and are no longer surprised by our good fortune, we just kind of take it for granted. So this exercise seems to be resetting those feelings of gratitude or happiness we had when we first got that thing. So Clarence's remedy for George's unhappiness does seem to have some basis in psychological theory. In fact, George is happy even before he knows that the community has come through for him. So an interesting question, maybe for an alternative ending to this film, would be, what if the community had not gathered the money together for George and he'd gone to jail? Would his experience in the parallel world have maintained his happy state even then? I don't know, you tell me. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode of The Psychology of Film. Please leave comments and subscribe.